rats. I always hear these rats scratching in the roof when I try to sleep. It keeps me awake some nights, but other nights I sleep through it, blissfully unaware that they continue to rake their little claws across the roof all night long. I share a room with my twin sister, and she can never sleep through it. She often wakes me up, standing over my bed and whispering tiredly, "They're doing it again, Kayla. The rats are scratching again." I don't really know why she's always woke me up though. I mean, we were only 12 years old, and it's not like I could go out and buy a rat trap or climb into the attic myself and catch them with my bare hands. So we would walk down the dark corridor in a straight line towards my parents' bedroom and wake up my dad. He always knew what to do. He would put us back to sleep and tell us that the next day he would buy some new kind of trap to kill the furry bastards with. Don't get me wrong, I hate cruelty to animals. I think it's probably one of the worst crimes imaginable, and I'd do anything to protect one. But when you've been kept up night after night after night with those diseased vermin scurrying their way through your roof, looking for God knows what up there, you would do anything to get rid of them. And when I say being kept up for night after night, I mean months. The rats in the roof had been there ever since my sister and I had turned 12. The first time they made their existence known to us was the night we turned 12. Their little tapping claws scouring the roof, their beady eyes looking for food in the darkness, their diseased bodies pushing over one another to find anything edible. We wanted them gone, and my dad knew what had to be done. This time he bought these extra strength rat baits, guaranteed to kill a rat with one nibble of the navy blue rectangle of poison. He climbed through to the attic and into the roof, where he lay the little death squares all around the place. Climbing back down through the manhole, he turned to us and rubbed his hands together. "Now, we just have to wait. They'll be gone soon." And he walked past us and out of the laundry. That night we didn't hear a thing for quite some time. "Dad did it," I whispered to my sister. "He got them." Though I still wasn't entirely sure. Looking back at that now, I think that I said that more to reassure myself than to comfort her. Although, as the night progressed, we began to hear the noises again, and I knew the rats hadn't fallen for the bait. We would have to consult our dad again in the morning. I always thought it was strange how we never heard them during the day. Maybe that was due to the fact that it was quieter at night and easier to hear them, or they never came out during the day. Whichever it was, I didn't care at the time. I just wanted them dead, and nothing was working. God knows how many different traps and different kinds of bait we stuck up in the roof. I bet anyone else who poked their heads into the attic would think it was a secret stash of poisons belonging to a serial killer. But we were just desperate to get rid of them, and they seemed desperate not to leave. Dad had eventually had enough, as understandably anyone would. My mum had begun to grow tired of his money wasting on all of the different products he had bought trying to get rid of them. She suggested that he climb into the roof and find out where they were coming from and if any at all had died. So, drawing near to the end of his tether, he climbed up into the attic with a torch. "You're going to have to go all the way down to our bedroom because that's the only place they ever scratch," my sister said, as his legs disappeared into the thick blackness above. We could hear him thumping and crawling his way along the roof, all the way down the hallway. "Have you seen any dead rats yet, Dad?" I called, hoping the darkness hadn't swallowed him entirely and drowning him and the sound of the outside world. Luckily, it hadn't. "Not yet. It's weird. There isn't any evidence proving that there were ever rats up here. It's really strange." He trailed off mid-sentence, and I thought it would be best to let him concentrate. After a few minutes of thumping around in the roof, he crawled back out through the attic. No dead rats or traps or anything, except for an old, torn and bloodied t-shirt. "What's that?" I asked. "I just found it. I've got no idea who it belongs to. Probably been accidentally thrown up there during a party or something," he said as he threw it into a nearby bin. "That's not the only weird thing either. All of the traps are gone," he said, a serious look overcoming his face. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked him. "I don't really know. They've just vanished," my dad replied, a dumbfounded look upon his face. "I have to talk with your mother now, girls. Leave us alone for a bit." And he pushed past us and walked towards his bedroom. That night at the dinner table, Mum and Dad talked to us about a proposal they had in order to catch whatever animal was in the roof. It had to be intelligent to have gotten rid of the traps and bait. Dad thought it may have been a possum, but the only way to get rid of it was to make sure of what it was. "We're going to place a camera in the roof and see what starts making those scratching noises. If we know what it is, we have a better chance of capturing it, okay?" Mum said to us. I couldn't fault their logic. It seemed like a good plan. Up the camera went into the swirling darkness. Dad placed it in the stretch along where our bedroom was located, seeing as that's where most of the activity happened. He had put a SIM card in the camera with 12 hours of recording time on it. Dad put the camera up there at 8 PM and we would retrieve it at 8 AM. Then it was just a waiting game. I heard the scratching noises all the way through the night as usual. They started at exactly 9:24. I know because I checked the time so I would know when to fast forward the camera to in the morning. A pungent odour had also made itself known ever since Dad had found that t-shirt. It smelled like raw sewage and my nostrils were always burning when I woke up. But considering we had no idea what we were up against, Dad couldn't do much about it. I couldn't really get a wink of sleep because I knew that the next day we were going to discover what the animal was and get rid of it. So I just lay awake all night long thinking of the blissful days of sleep that lay ahead of me. At a little past 8 in the morning, my dad woke me up and handed me the camera. "Watch this and tell me what animal it is," he said, turning to walk back out of my bedroom. "Where are you going then?" I asked him, stopping him in his tracks. The bait and traps mysteriously reappeared. "I'm going to get a box to collect them and then head up there. Funny thing is, they're right over your bedroom," he said, giving me spirit fingers and exclaiming, "Woo! Spooky." Then he laughed and exited my room. I shook my head and fast forwarded the footage on the camera to the exact time I heard the scratching. After a few minutes of fast forwarding, the camera read 9:20 p.m. I figured I would rewind it to the point where the animal actually came into the roof, so I might be able to recognise it better. 1 minute passed, 2, 2.5. I watched the screen intently to capture any kind of movement whatsoever, and then finally it made its emergence. Something that was curled in the fetal position at the far side of the corner began to move. Its spine was visible in the dim light, protruding through its pale yellow skin, almost the colour of milk. Its long and bony arms stretched outwards, its skinny and impossibly long legs stretching downward. Its limbs seemed too long for its body. Cramped muscles from lying in the same position for hours and hours finally got relief. Its body was spotted with blood and a bloody rag on around its legs. Whatever it was disgusting. But the scariest part was when it turned towards the camera. Pure black eyes, the colour of coal, stared straight into the camera. It opened its mouth in some kind of putrid grin, yellowing diseased teeth peeking out from its mouth, desperate to escape. It was at the point that I knew it was a human. It crawled up to the camera, its bones visible through the thin yellow membrane, acting as its skin. Its pure black eyes stared into the camera. Then it touched the lens, and I could almost feel its brown, rotting fingernails against my face. Then it turned from the camera, spit starting to draw from its mouth, and it crawled over to the spot just above me and my sister's bed. Then its face turned towards the camera unnaturally, and it began to scratch, staring at the camera the entire time. No, staring through the camera and directly at me. I couldn't watch it any longer. I fast forwarded the footage as fast as it could go, and it never blinked or looked away from the camera. For the entire 10 hours it scratched at the roof. Then it stopped, placed the rat traps that had disappeared the day before in front of the camera, then turned away and returned to the fetal position it had come from. It tucked its impossibly long and skinny limbs into its body and curled into the fetal position. It hadn't left, and now Dad was up there. My heart jolted in my chest and fear overwhelmed every inch of my body. I heard a scream from above. Spider love bite. Maxine was beautiful, lovely, smart, fair, two-faced, a backstabber, a cheat, a liar, a whore and a user. Whatever she wanted, she got immediately. She had an overwhelming, overbearing and oversized ego and was proud of it. One of her favourite victims to torture was a freshman called Agnes May Altman. It was considered normal behaviour for juniors and seniors to torture fresh meat, as they called them. Agnes was not the loveliest of lovelies, but her inner beauty held all the treasures a soul could ever want, and her virginal beauty emitted a sort of presence about her. Maxine, despite her beauty, was jealous of that because it was considered laughable, even to the popular folk, to call Maxine a virgin, considering her reputation with cheating with her best friend's boyfriend. If it weren't for Maxine, she would be treated humanely. But since Maxine was so popular, Agnes would never be free from her severe acts of verbal sadism. Poor Agnes was walking down the hall one day when Maxine pulled a strand of her hair out of her scalp. Agnes cried in pain, and when the hall monitor asked what had happened, Agnes never revealed what Maxine had done to her. As a new school year rolls into place, Agnes is now a sophomore, and Maxine is a senior, but that doesn't stop Maxine from torturing Agnes. But Agnes had changed physically over the summer. She was now 16 and had a curvier body, fuller cheeks, and her long dull hair shined with radiance. Without meaning to, her beauty was beginning to surpass Maxine. Since this was going to be Maxine's last year in high school, she wasn't going to have any of that. She was going to run for prom queen this year and wasn't going to be sullied by a mere sophomore. So later that day she waited in the hall where Agnes usually passed to go to her next class. As soon as Agnes turns into the hallway, Maxine sets her foot out and trips Agnes. She falls and her face hits the floor. Agnes screamed in pain and Maxine laughed in return. She wanted to ruin Agnes and had succeeded. But Agnes wasn't thinking of that, but anger towards Maxine burned in her eyes. Agnes was such a sight. Maxine shrinks back with fear at the way Agnes stares at her. You'll get yours, Maxine Evans. You will get yours. May the heavens and the deep abysmal pits of hell be the witness of that today. I hope everyone will see the ugliness and the wickedness of what you truly are inside. You may hide it behind that pretty face of yours, but it won't last forever. Curse you, Maxine. I hope your undeserved beauty withers and dies, so that the rotting carcass that you really are will be exposed for all to see. With that, Agnes turns on her heel and walks into the ladies' room. Maxine shrugs and smiles at what she did to Agnes. Freak, Maxine whispers to herself. Later that night, while she is asleep, a tiny spider crawls up to the apple of her cheek and sits there. It stays there for many hours until Maxine brushes it off in her sleep. The next morning in the mirror, she sees a little red pimple on her cheek. She is outraged and puts a little astringent on it so that it wouldn't spread. Her day at school was fine, but when she got home, the little red spot had darkened to a deep blood red. Later that night, she washed her face twice and put more astringent on it, and then went to bed. The next morning she woke to find that the spot was getting bigger. This time her friends had really noticed, and this concerned Maxine. Agnes, in the other hand, was lucky. All she had was a bruised nose and a split lip. But people were beginning to talk to her. Maxine was beginning to wonder. Later that night, she went to her mother and asked her if it would have been wise to pop the pimple to get it over with, but her mother advised her against it, saying that it was too risky and that popping a pimple could cause bruising of the skin and scarring. So to bed she went. As time went on, Agnes had healed and her beauty was restored. All of Maxine's friends began to talk to her, but despite it all, Maxine was still herself. She still never tried to impress anybody, and her pimple was now the size of a thumb imprint. No one would talk to Maxine because of it, and also because they feared that it could blow at any time. Maxine was miserable and now suspicious of Agnes. Through it all, Maxine never changed and continued to call Agnes names whenever she saw her in the hallway, but Agnes acted as if she didn't hear or see her. Maxine felt as if she were a has-been. She couldn't cope with that and began to lose her patience. She runs to the girls' bathroom and screams at the mirror when she sees the oversized zit on her face. What did I do to deserve this? I did nothing. 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 Maxine screamed so loud that the pimple burst. At first she was relieved, but then she noticed little creatures crawling out of her pus and skin. They were tiny baby spiders, thousands of them crawling all over her face. She bats them away from her face, and a group of the girls walked in on her. They saw her face and screamed, then ran out of the bathroom. Just then, she sees 2 feet in the bathroom stall. Agnes makes her way out of the stall and sees Maxine's face. There's no sign of fear etched anywhere on her face. I told you that you were going to get yours, Maxine. I just never thought it would be that bad. Agnes smiles and says, "Oh, and before I forget, that's just the first batch of them." The infestation. They have invaded. It started out small, like most catastrophes. I was exploring my new house, checking out various rooms and noting where I could put down some furniture. As I was walking through the empty house, I saw a small insect crawling across the floor. I stepped on it and thought nothing else of it. A few days later, I was putting my stuff away in my new room when I saw some bugs crawling around on my dresser. I remembered the time I stepped on the bug a few days ago and thought that there might be a lot of bugs in the neighbourhood. It was nothing serious. I just needed to make sure doors were closed so things don't get in too much. Again, without thinking much of it, I squashed the bugs and went about my business. Things escalated quickly from there. These bugs started popping up all over the house. I made it a daily routine to go room to room, killing various insects. I called in an exterminator multiple times, and multiple times he said he removed a small colony of the little bastards. The problem just got worse and worse. I eventually got a team of expert exterminators to do a complete sweep of my house, cleaning out every nook and cranny. They said they must have killed over 3,000 of the bugs. Everything was fine for a few days after that, until I found one of the little shits on my windowsill. They seemed to multiply every day, and I couldn't get rid of them. It didn't stop there. Neighbours started complaining about the bugs and called more exterminators to try and help. I decided that I wanted no part of this and promptly moved out to a place further north. I had thought these things liked it down in the warm, humid south, so I wouldn't find them up north. For a while, I was right. About a week after I moved, I saw a news story about how a major crisis had risen in the town my old house was in. Bugs were everywhere. Grocery stores closed because of the bugs being found in the food. Medical stores closed when bugs started contaminating medication. Some buildings were actually quarantined because of the absolutely massive number of bugs living in them. The worst one, my old one. It's been 2 months. 6 continents have been consumed by this plague of bugs. The people who stayed died from various diseases or from the anarchy that began because of these damn bugs. There are barely 100 million humans left. Anywhere these bugs go, they breed and breed and breed. Scientists estimate that one of these bugs has an average of 10,000 offspring in its 6-week life cycle. When new ones are born, they are capable of breeding in 4 to 9 minutes, depending on the environment. They can survive anywhere from 140 degrees Fahrenheit to minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit. They will never be stopped. Wait a second. What's that black thing on my desk? Oh shit. Beneath the floorboards. The conversation with my house sitter grabbed my attention as soon as I answered the phone. The dog died under the house. I let it sink in. Yeah, she's wedged between 2 joists. We can't pull her out. Try harder, you idiots, I thought to myself, furious. 3 days ago, I'd been informed by the house sitter that they had heard barking coming from under the floorboards, but obviously they never did anything about it. Another wave of anger washed over me. I let them have it for letting my dog bake to death in a crawl space during yet another hottest summer on record. and tell them I'm on my way with a couple of friends who volunteered to help. My childhood pet, dead. My vacation, cut short. When I got home and stepped out of the car, the smell immediately hit me. Nowhere was safe from it. I headed to my backyard, to the entrance of the open crawl space. It never had a covering of any kind. Safe, right? Hindsight is 2020. I found myself playing the blame game, yet somehow I was in the hot seat. But then again, who hasn't blamed themselves in the heat of the moment for a personal tragedy? She's way towards the back, my house sitter says. One of my friends pokes his head into the crawl space and shines his phone light around for a second, and then emerges disheartened. Yeah, he's right. She's behind a pipe and He hesitates, choking on what he has to say next. She's too bloated for this to be a quick or clean job. Those words stuck in my heart like an arrow. It seemed otherworldly. Nothing like this had ever even crossed my mind before. After some time and discussion of solutions, we initially decided on a rope. That ended up being impossible without making excessive physical contact with my dog's body. Eventually we realised the bloat was the largest factor in adding difficulty to the removal, and one friend hesitantly recommends puncturing the corpse to relieve the pressure. All the other ideas were for naught. So in the end it was decided that was best. The friend who made the suggestion volunteers for the task. We found a 6 or 7 foot pole, a steak knife and some duct tape, thus rigging a crude spear. After a second and some mental warm-ups, he ties a t-shirt around his nose and mouth, then enters the crawl space. We waited. He was under there for maybe 2 minutes before he scrambled back out, gasping for air. I was able to puncture the body, but the knife broke off and got stuck. Disgusting. Maybe we can't. We all grew silent and cold when we heard a tap from the crawl space. Focused on the entrance, we stood gingerly at first. We saw a twisted snout appear from the shadow of the crawl space, then eye sockets teeming with maggots, and eventually out trotted my dog, her fur still attached, maggots dripping from her body like water after a bath, dragging her wet entrails across the dust of my yard, the knife in her ribs bobbing loosely in its seat among her flesh. And that's it for tonight, my little hellhounds. Thanks for listening. If you're well and truly creeped out, then don't forget to like the video and click the subscribe button, as these really do help the channel. And don't forget to click the bell icon so you get notified every time I upload. If you have any scary stories, then submit them to Reddit r/homeofscares. and follow me on Twitter at homeofscares. Now, good night, my little hellhounds.